coming. What else do I like? I like singing Video Kill the Radio Star, and maybe a couple of Eagles tunes.
I didn't realize you were a karaoke connoisseur.
I love karaoke. It's so much fun. Like just the fact that you're stuck in a room with a bunch of other people, and everyone's going to sing eventually, so you're going to have to make a fool of yourself. But making a fool of yourself with enough confidence and a kind of, how do I say, a camp flair voluntarily is just the best way to go about
Freddie
it.
Mercury your performance.
Absolutely, or Tim Curry, isn't it? Wasn't he in like Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Okay.
Rocky Horror has some unbelievable tunes.
You just got to go all in and just show them what you got.
Do you have a go-to karaoke song, Tom?
It would probably be like a country tune. I quite enjoy like Mumford & Sons music just because I can wail into the speaker. And it's got a good enough kind of rhythm as well that you're tapping your foot. But the lyrics always escape me after a few drinks. So
it
does turn a bit nasty when you start freestyling,
It's always the bridge of a song, isn't it? That like throws the modulation where the key change. Particularly if you try and go like real brave and you go 80s where they have got real big key changes in there, and it normally goes like up an octave or whatever, and you're trying to sing a George Michael song that starts off super easy, and then come the bridge of the song, you're just way out of your depth.
Freedom.
Yeah, and it's just at the time as well when people are like kind of like at the start of the song, you're like, you're singing this song, this guy is funny, he's a shit singer, Then you've got the second chorus, you're like, I'm done with this guy, and then he goes into the more difficult bridge.
Or if you start singing the second chorus and you're like, actually, I only know the first verse. Or, you go into the second verse. I literally only know the first verse. I don't know anything else after this. It's like the Stacey's Mom song as well. Like, I can always forget the second verse of it. And then you're just like standing there awkwardly trying to read it off the screen with your back to everyone. And everyone's just like getting...
Here's a question for you. What's the second line or the second lyric line, whatever, to Lady in Red by Christa Berg? So the first line being, I never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight.
I'm going to immediately answer with I have no clue. Very unsure on that one.
But it's such a famous song. I know the first line so well.
Something you shine so bright.
Yeah, okay. That one part is kind of easy. But after that, who knows?
No.
Who knows?
Yeah, I just remember from Dodgeball,
best movie
at
ever
created. At the end when he's like sees her at the bar and your one comes over and she's just like the big monobrow on her.
Yeah.
And Lady in Red is playing in the background.
Tom, thanks a million for doing the podcast. Really, really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Great to be on you.
Yeah, just to take the time out of your Sunday and come here. It's much appreciated. Tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I don't know too much, if not anything. So how did you come about to being in Dublin? Or
so bit of a wild one. I'd kind of taken a couple of years out before university to just go and explore the world, and I was working on a super yacht in Southeast Asia and Malaysia.
Wow.
And I met some Irish doctors. They were really, really good fun. I think the Six Nations was on at the time, or there was some international rugby. So we ended up having a few nights out with them, and then the parents were putting on a bit of pressure, saying, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I remember saying, "I think I want to go to Ireland. It seems like a good decision." And so I ended up coming here and studying law, and so I've kind of been here ever since. And I must say I've really enjoyed it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but like even going back to before the working on a super yacht in Southeast Asia, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town about 400 kilometers north of Harare in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
So it was probably the most northern farming districts just before the national parks all start, because obviously in the northern regions of Zim, there's the Zambezi River and the escarpment, so there's huge malaria, and so that's naturally where all the national parks and forests and wildlife has been left. So you had this fantastic kind of farming districts where we grew tobacco and maize, and then immediately thereafter for about 200, 300 kilometers, you just had elephants, buffalo, lion, and the lot. So every now and then you'd be looking after the tobacco, and there'll be all the seedlings planted at the beginning of the year, and like eland and a lot of antelope love the nicotine. And so you'll just see these wildlife wandering through the crops, eating all the seedlings, and you're trying to chase them off. But obviously it's fantastic to have the game there, but at the same time you're trying to run a business.
It's acting as a pest. Yeah,
exactly.
Goddamn antelope.
Yeah.
Proper, like.
All right, so this conversation has got quite real quite quickly. So I can't even imagine what it was like growing up in that type of scenario. I imagine for you it was something normal as anything else, but
yeah, it was. I suppose compared to the Irish kind of upbringing, in some ways it will be similar. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are from out in the country, you know, and it's all like family of farmers. You're just trying to run a business, so you're trying to help out.
Yeah.
But see, Zimbabwe obviously has a bit of a complicated past, and so I think all of that was kind of put to bed. A lot of the commercial farming in the early 2000s, there was like a regime decision to take away commercial farms. There's a whole political history behind that. So most of the commercial farmers gravitated to like the towns and cities in the center and kind of had to change profession, which was like a lot of upheaval. And I mean, when a country's backbone is agriculture, it obviously threw the economy into quite a downward spiral. I don't know if you've seen all the memes about the $100 trillion notes and.
Yeah, I remember that kind of printing of money, like there was no tomorrow, and well, maybe even because I'd have a vague recollection of what happened there, but from, let's say, as you said, year 2000 until like we're now 2023, could you give it like a short synopsis of like what's happened or what's gone on in Zimbabwe from that time?
Yeah, sure. So imagine in 2001 you'd had your first kind of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, and that was largely attributed to involvement in Rwanda in the 90s.
Yeah.
The taking of the commercial farms, and then like an opposition being formed against the government.
Yeah.
That there previously wasn't. So from about 2001 to 2008, there was quite a strong opposition led against the government, and there was all kinds of elections and recounts, and there was a lot of kind of civil unrest because the government didn't want any opposition. So it was very unstable. We were printing more money than we had. The economy was just running. But by about 2010, 2011, things had, I would say, stabilized rather than kind of reached a balance, because we were unstable but teetering on the brink. The economy could run at any point. But I think people started using foreign currency. The opposition had largely been split, so there was a number of leaders that had now decided to lead their own parties, which shattered the opposition that had originally formed. And so everyone had just given up hope, because I mean, Robert Mugabe, the president at the time, had been in charge since 1980, and we were now in 2010. And I mean, it's only so often that you can say how long is he gonna keep being in charge for? But thankfully, things got really bad when his wife started, Joyce Mugabe. She was very, very sinister. And she was wanting to attack and kill all kinds of different parties and groups. And I think that really kind of galvanized the leaders within his own government. And so in 2017, we had this fantastic coup. It wasn't a coup, because at 2 a.m, we had a general come onto the national TV and say, "This is not a coup. This is just the military taking over the government. Can everyone stay in their houses?" And everyone said, "It's only Zimbabwe where you're going to have a coup that's not really a coup." No one wanted to acknowledge it. And so Mugabe stepped down, and we had this new leader step up, Emerson Mnangagwa. And he's quite a business-minded individual, very kind of intelligent. Previously, he was in charge of the armed forces, so his nickname is the Crocodile, which, I mean, it's not really a great nickname.
Where did you get that nickname? Like,
for a benevolent leader.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like this, like, you know, these like comedy, like dictator movies. Like, what kind of name could we give him?
Are we the bad guys?
Yeah. It's not synonymous with democracy, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
But he took charge. We're all super excited, and then we've kind of fallen back into the same pot, different stew type thing. So
okay.
But it's a lot better now, because I would say the Civil War was in 1980. So like my generation, maybe the generation above me, and more so below me, have all kind of grown up with pals across all lines, and so there's no more hatred from our end. It's really the older generations that were involved in that conflict that still harbor the hatred.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, at school, you kind of mates with guys whose parents would have been in the controlling government, who would be related to all our sons of ministers and whatnot.
Mm.
And I mean, you play sports with them, you're in clubs with them, you have the crack with them.
Yeah.
So, look, I have great hope for where Zimbabwe's going, but I mean, at the moment, economically, we're not great, but tourism-wise, it's definitely somewhere to visit.
Yeah. Would love to go.
It's
Yeah.
especially like Victoria Falls,
Mm.
the Zambezi River, Lake Kariba.
Mm.
There's just so much to see, so much wildlife, and because we don't have so many tourists, it's not like Kenya or South Africa where you're going to be sharing like the wilderness with 50 other Land Cruisers with Swiss guys and massive cameras clicking away. It's usually you on your own with a guide that's super excited to have guests for the second time on that year.
How is it in terms of safety? So I've got very little experience of Africa in general, but I spent a couple of months in Tanzania, and there was just at the time I was like 19, 20 years old. It was a relative, well, no, it was a big culture shock for me. But things like not being able to go out at nighttime, things like just, obviously being careful and looking after yourself and not doing anything silly. But how is it in terms of your general safety and security when you go there?
I would say, as with any place, obviously common sense is your biggest kind of factor. And I mean, you always hear these stories of tourists in any country coming to horrible kind of ends because they've been a little bit silly. But I mean, Zimbabwe is very safe. It's not like South Africa, which, as you know, is like the rape capital of the world at the moment. Just like incredible violence. The people are very calm. You can walk at night, but again, you wouldn't be walking around with your wallet in the back of your pocket. It just means like think about what you're doing.
Don't be silly. Yeah,
exactly. That's one of the things we do pride ourselves with. Although we never did take action against the government, or we probably won't. People are very peaceful. And you can kind of see it across Africa with the different tribes. Like in South Africa, the Zulus would be known to be quite warlike. Similar in Kenya with the Maasai and the Mangati tribes. It kind of lends itself to how like the people operate. Like, and the majority in Zimbabwe would be from the tribe in the north called the Shona. They're very peaceful, very calm guys. Very big into agriculture, as in growing crops, opposed to looking after cattle. And the tribes that usually look after cattle in the south would be more warlike because they've had to be more nomadic, moving their cattle around, coming into more conflicts. So that's kind of where their base would be. Yeah, if you follow me.
Just before I've just one curiosity in my mind. Just from hearing you speak, you speak about this very well. You obviously know what you're talking about. Before we go into more of your story, a lot of people are saying that over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, there's a great hope for Africa in terms of a rising middle class, and that there's going to be a big boost in the economy in Africa in general. Is that something that you would share that hope for, or how would you see it?
I mean, you've got some front runners in Rwanda and Botswana, which are certainly some of the fastest growing economies at the moment. I think what they're doing that no other countries are doing is they're ensuring that they're exporting everything at good prices. I mean, their coffee and I think sugarcane as well is doing really well in the market. So I mean, in that sense, you can kind of see that there are countries that are trying to do business. There's a lot of investment. I mean, at the moment, when you see the impact that Ukraine being at war has had on the European markets, I mean, simply just in milk, even trying to buy whey protein, there's none. I mean, you can't get creatine. And you're suddenly looking at any of the other big cattle countries in the world, and it's India and Africa. So I suppose there is going to be a growth. Whether it's the middle class is another question, because I mean, some of those economies is like Nigeria has 121 million people, and much like the rest of Africa, I would say most people are on like an average basic wage of $1 a day. You may get to the middle class there, but there's no way that they'll be seeing your average salary of €11 an hour.
Middle class money for like more developed Western countries, like
exactly. Yeah. But I mean, geez, I'd be super hopeful that it does become the case.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to be thinking long term, anyways. For if you're not thinking a couple hundred years down the line, then it's quite an insular look. Like Africa, without a doubt, will be like major players in whatever comes. And it's just about empowering people, giving them education and getting them to a level where they're able to make decisions. If that is to have to emigrate for a while, to come back, bring back the knowledge and bring back like remittance. But again, with that many people and such a large amount of land to be managed. It'll be a few hundred years.
Yeah.
With successful integrate, not just like saying, oh, we're going to help you, for sustainable like country development and sustainable human education, hundreds of years, I think.
Yeah, potentially. Who knows what's going to happen, but I think technology could hopefully be a big factor in speeding that up a little bit too. You were on a boat in Southeast Asia sailing around on some super yacht. What exactly was your job on the boat?
So I had somehow convinced him that I was a diving instructor, despite the fact I'd never dived before. So I'd kind of been walking the docks in Miami a couple months prior and been trying to get a job as a deckhand, which is quite easy work, spraying down, driving tenders, looking after guests. And I got a phone call from a yacht that was based in the Philippines at the time. And they said, are you interested? Can you dive? And I'd said yes, and went across. And obviously the first few dives didn't go as planned. didn't put the right weights in. So some of the guests were plummeting down to the depths. Others weren't sinking at all. But it was good fun. There was a couple Zimbabweans on the vessel working as deckhands. And so they'd kind of put my CV in the runnings. And so this was a really wealthy Russian and Kazakhstani family that owned it. And they were continuously going around the world in the yacht. So they would come on for a few weeks, they would fly back, and we would go around. So they wanted to see the Philippines, Palau, Papua New Guinea, all those kind of areas. And then obviously I joined at that point, so I only did the Southeast Asian tour, but the vessel went on to go to Hawaii, Galapagos, up to Alaska, and then just continued going around.
Wow.
So it was awesome to see, because I mean we did some dives and some sites in Papua New Guinea where there was just no depth. It was very much uncharted in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
You didn't know where we could anchor, where we could sail.
Wow.
And all of it was kind of the captain would say, right, so you guys are going to go around here, jump in the water, see what it's like. Let me know what kind of dive it is. Can we take the guests there? Can't we? You other guys, you're going on the beach, go and take a look there and see what you're dealing with.
You're obviously comfortable enough in the water to be doing this type of stuff.
Oh, geez, yeah, love the water. Yeah. Thankfully, played a lot of water polo at school, so comfortable
Strong
there.
Swimmer.
But
water polo, being in a swimming pool and out in the middle of the ocean, are completely different though. Like, did you have one of those moments where you're underwater and you're just like, what happens if a whale pops up and eats me up? Like, I'd be freaking out. Even in Irish water, I can't deal with it.
It's definitely, there was a few times where I did question everything. We had done a dive between two archipelagos of islands, and I'd say it must have been like maybe 10 kilometers between them. And the guests had gone across on jet skis, and there'd been 2 or 3 of us in the tender boat, done the dive, and on the way back, and we were midway between these two sets of islands, and it was kind of like a channel going out into the Pacific, and the other end was back into Biak. And the jet ski ran out of fuel on one of the guests. So the captain was like, you get in the water, sit on the jet ski with your radio, and I'll come collect you in about an hour. So I was like, sound, that's fantastic. and it's obviously not one of those nice big sea-doos that you can sit on. It's a stand-up. So it's only about 1 meter in length.
Jeez.
And so you have to tread water next to it. And I had to keep pressing the button to drain the water. Get in the water, super chilled, I can still hear the engine. Then it's suddenly quiet. I'm thinking, Jesus, this isn't a great idea, because my radio is going to probably run out of battery this evening if no one finds me. Ended up waiting 2 hours in the water.
Oh my!
And I kept on a radio, and I couldn't hear anyone talking back. There was no chatter. And then you start thinking about Jaws and that
like
theme music comes into your head.
Stop.
But yeah,
these little feet just like, kicking away, you just there draining the water off the yoke. I would be freaking out.
But you're in the middle of the ocean, so it is like, at some point it's either like a quick finish and Jaws just kind of comes and rips you apart, or you're endlessly floating around starving to death or getting sunburnt or whatever it might be. That sounds horrific.
Yeah, it was a bit of a Life of Pi kind of precursor, but thankfully I was saved. But I mean, there was a number of times when you
So you came after your time on the boat. Your parents asked you. You met some doctors, and they said Ireland is great, and you decided to come here. What were the first? You've been here a long time. Like, what was like the first couple of months like? you know, looking back on it now, do you have any idea you're going to be here so long, or?
Geez, I think I was firstly very surprised because I got here in September, and everyone had jokingly referred to the weather, being like, "You're in for an absolute treat. Like, pack jackets, hoodies," and I'd come from wearing my short shorts around the garden to being like super winterproofed. But the weather was actually quite good, and the running joke was, "Geez, this is the week of summer, or this is the last week of sun you're going to get." But I remember quite quickly thinking I really enjoyed Ireland. Obviously, the first few nights I didn't know where to go, so I ended up going to the likes of Temple Bar and absolutely blowing the budget on €12 pints. But once I started meeting people in the course and going out, it became quite obvious that you're starting to set up a network. And I really enjoyed Irish law. It's very good law compared to a lot of other jurisdictions.
Okay.
So I mean that definitely was the pull. And I mean, in my head, I also thought there's no need to be studying Irish law if I'm going to go and practice in another country. And the most obvious thing is to use it here. So I suppose that was the original thought.
So you went in, you did your FE1s or whatever, and are you working as a solicitor now, or?
No, so I'm a qualified barrister. So
so
working in crime and civil law.
Wow.
So did the King's Inns exams and the King's Inns course, and then you do a year of deviling or a year of pupillage, as it's called, and it's essentially you work for free for a year with a senior colleague, and they just throw you loads and loads of work, and you try your best not to stutter your way through anything or completely fumble the bag or drop the ball, which is great fun, because I mean, you're never going to be part of a murder until you 9 or 10 years down the way. Whereas when you're working with a senior colleague, that's the first case you're working on. You're sitting there reading through the transcripts, having the discussions with the prosecution on how you're going to do it. It's been very, very much a fun learning curve. But you do learn to have a thick skin, because like you so often go into court and you have no instructions or any idea of what you're supposed to be saying, and you're just trying to do it on the fly.
Well, I can imagine that being a really stressful situation. Everyone's there listening to you. You have to sound professional. Like, no, what's your technique for dealing with those situations?
I suppose the best advice I was told is no one's listening to you. They're either just finished and are busy trying to remember what was said to them, or they're about to start and they're focusing on what they need to say. So there's as much as we would all love to be selfish and think everyone's always listening to us, they aren't.
Yeah.
And so when you are speaking, just focus on either chatting to the judge or making your point to a witness, because that's as simple as it is.
Yeah. Get your value across.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Really cool. Interesting story. What year did this start? So Russ said you've been here quite a while. Like, when did you come to Ireland?
So I think I came in September 2015.
Okay.
And obviously studied the first 3 years. Then I worked in a solicitor's firm for about 1.5 years as a trainee come clerk, which is good fun to see that side of things. Obviously, it's a lot more administrative based.
Yeah.
Barristers at the end of the line, that's when you have a problem. It's because you need someone to speak for you in court.
Yeah.
Where solicitors are more so like helping out with contracts and negotiations. And then from there, went into the King's Inns, and here we are today.
Yeah. I have a friend who's currently going through it, and a couple of others who have gone through it, but it kind of different routes to what you have. One's gone down the corporate law end of things. He's just finished his last set. So I think there's 8 exams that you do in your FE1. So he did the first 4, and he's just finished his second 4. But I think he's a little bit undecided as to which direction he's going to go. He's doing the corporate thing at the moment as well, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the way he goes with it. But it sounds like pretty intense work, whether you're doing something like what you're doing or what those guys do. Seems pretty interesting.
It's certainly, the solicitor's exams are certainly a backbreaker.
Yeah,
because it's really huge. Whereas I'd say the King's Inns exams are just a lot very quickly. You have to hit them all in one week.
Yeah.
So you're just waking up each day going into exams.
Yeah.
And you come out and your head's like Dijon mustard. You just don't know what to do with yourself. But it's definitely the most fascinating, I would say, profession to be dealing with, because you've got such a mix every single day. You're dealing with people at the very edges of society on a daily basis. Whether it's people in the criminal courts that have been done for careless driving, and they just Joe Soap who works down in the spa, or you're dealing with high end kind of white collar crime, guys who've stolen millions off of mortgage frauds or whatever it is. It's really fun to be seeing all those different aspects, and it's surprising how much of society is in court every single day.
Yeah. From your perspective then, and that unique point of view that you have on things here, like you have your finger in the pulse of definitely one strong like culture. With you'll have a good idea of what the culture is of Ireland, basically. How do you perceive it? You said like Irish laws or Irish jurisdiction is quite interesting from that point of view, but in terms of the culture and what you see, you didn't grow up here. Is there anything that kind of shocks you? Is there anything that you're pleasantly surprised by or appalled by?
She's a very good question. Firstly, I would say I was always very impressed with the attitude of the general public, of the Irish general public. Really, it's a very happy-go-lucky, very happy to chat to anyone at any time, and like for the most part, always very excitable, which I really like in people, because I mean I've been to countries where they're not as chatty, they're not as easy to kind of open up with, whereas usually you end up in a smoking area or even at a bus stop and you could strike up a conversation with someone, and they would be more than willing to joke about anything. In terms of working in the courts, it's been interesting because on the one side, unfortunately, most of the people in the legal profession do come from a certain area in society, and that's kind of like a South Dublin, Leinster supporting kind of group. But I must say it has become so different now that there's so many other people from other places in Ireland that are in it, and so you kind of have this nice mix, and everyone really wants to get involved and be a part of it. And yes, there are people that aren't interested in the justice per se. It's more so the lifestyle. I would say a lot of people working in the courts are there to try and make sure that things are done in the way that they should be.
Good to know. I'm just going to stop it there. We're at 30 minutes there, guys. That's great. Well, man, you've got a fascinating story.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, no, I wasn't prepared enough for this.
Yeah.
Let me just wait till that processes and we'll keep going. Ross, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah.
For anybody that's watching on YouTube, this is how professional this gets.
We'll let it do it in post.
Will we?
No, fuck it, we'll do it live.
Myself
We'll
going
do it
through
live.
6 hours of video content. Well, it takes a little bit. Anyway. Alright, Ross. We'll go 1, 2, 3.
So I mean, we'll kind of keep a little bit on Ireland as well as Zimbabwe. Like, you have had, I've known you since 2015. You know, you're friends with my brother, and you Roger and yourself went off to Tanzania for a little while, looking after a bit on the farm, and it's strange that. Such a strange kind of friendship. Roger's my brother, so it's a strange friendship that Roger had, and it's kind of one that I kind of enjoy, because you're such an interesting character, and you have, you know, a lot of confidence in your own ability, and I don't think you've ever been kind of, oh, I'm down in the dumps. But how do you keep yourself motivated, like, to keep doing what you're doing, or to kind of stay in Ireland, or just to like have friends come with you around the place? Like, what keeps you ticking? Like,
Geez, well, firstly, I would say Roger's definitely as mad and as outgoing as they come. I mean, the situation there was, I was supposed to be taking a fellow classmate to Tanzania to work, and he pulled out at the last minute. And I remember calling Roger and saying, any chance you're free to come to Tanzania for 2 months this summer? We're going to be going to the middle of absolutely nowhere, and we're going to be working in villages looking after cattle. And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't have a passport at the moment, so I'll sort that out before next week. But I suppose the way I've always operated has been very much kind of go for it and deal with the details later, because I think most of the time people get very much wayladen with focusing too much on the things that are going to slow you down from getting there. And when I first came here, I was not at all sure of how to become a barrister, whether I wanted to become a barrister or where I was going to end up at all. I mean, even at this point, I'm not entirely clear. But I always kind of found that if you just did things and you were enthusiastic and took opportunities, that they would work out. And to this date, that's kind of always worked. Because I think if you overly focus on things, obviously you can become obsessive and ensure they happen. But most of the time, you're going to miss the chance to take that small little opportunity that's in the corner of your eye because you're hyper-fixated on getting to A when B could get you there a lot quicker.
Mhm.
I mean, that said, I still have no clue what's gonna happen next and where I'm gonna end up, because
So kind of keep things flexible. Don't have a goal, but don't be so proud that you won't change it halfway through. Do you think being that flexible did you learn that here, or did you learn that at home, or like how have you developed, I guess, over the last, say, 8 years?
I think I've just been fortunate enough that I've got the bounce of the ball so far. I remember finishing uni and going for interviews, and the first law firm I went to, I really liked, and they offered me a job, and I really got along with my boss. And then at the end of that, I remember saying to him over a few pints, I'm probably going to leave and go the barrister route. And he was like, fantastic, I'll help you where I can. And then the ins happened, and it was all just completely dumb luck. I never sat down and said, at this time of year, I'm gonna leave here and study for that. It just somehow just happened by I suppose being flexible. But at the same time, I think you do have to take your shots, especially at the moment. I think because we're coming out of these lockdowns, these really quiet kind of years, and I think it's very easy to have sat there and kind of felt that the life hasn't necessarily progressed.
Yeah.
Maybe not in a distance way, but possibly also a direction way. You're kind of not sure because you're not really taking any steps towards anything.
Yeah.
And so I think now there's a huge kind of energy around and lots of opportunities to go places and see places. And so it is a lot easier to kind of buy into that hype and go for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that, I suppose, who were sat, as you say, sitting at home, deciding what they wanted to do with themselves. And I think, in a way, it was good for a lot of people. Excuse me. There is a guy who's opened up a wine shop just around the corner from where I'm living. Or it's not an off license; it's more of a wine shop. I'm not like a wine connoisseur of it by any stretch, but when you go in there and talk to him, and you get his passion for the different wines, and I don't know, I have a clue what he's talking about, but he sells you something and he'll describe it, and you go back to him next week and you go, I really like that one, I didn't like that one. He'll be like, thanks for the feedback, I really appreciate that. Based on that, I'm going to recommend this one to you. Comparing that to going to Super Value, where you don't care. And I think a lot of these businesses and things like that have popped up where people have decided to go for it. And they're like, you know what? I'm absolutely crazy about wine. I'm going to try and open a wine shop. And the unfortunate thing about business is we don't know if it's going to be a success or not. But it's nice to see if people they're really going for it. And I think following their passions a little bit more. For me, it's even something similar with this podcast. There's nothing else in it other than we've started really enjoying doing it. I don't think a few years ago I would have done it. Even though I would have liked it just as much, but I don't know what it is. Something that's in that sense has changed. Maybe it's my age or whatever, just, trying to go for things. But I think there is that energy about the place, which is great. And let's see where it takes us. I think hopefully looking back in 10 years time, we'll see some nice stories and nice things having come out of these post lockdown years. You don't have much of an idea of where you're going at. You don't seem like the type of guy that has a fixed 5-year plan in your head, or maybe you do.
No, geez, that's my worst interview question. I had it recently, and I prepared for everything else in the interview, and Iman was like, "What? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I absolutely crumbled. I fumbled the bag because there's 10 or 15 places I'd like to be. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I'd love to go to New Zealand, spend some time there. But at the same time, I don't know if you guys know Patagonia down in South America. I've always had a huge inclination to go down there and just go and take a look. Yeah. And then also, life's extremely good in Dublin, and I kind of love where I'm up to now. And on Friday night, I remember saying to a friend, I'm never, ever leaving what I'm doing at the moment. I love working in the courts. I love having drinks like this. And so when someone asks you that, it's kind of on the basis that life's going to be lateral.
Yeah.
And it's such a weird way to look at life. I'm thinking, based on a screenshot of right now, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's, well, next week's got a lot of opportunities, and I'm not actually going to be making any decision based on what's going on now.
Yeah.
Is that the answer you gave them, or the answer you wish you would
No,
give?
geez, I gave such a long, drawn out, watery, wishy-washy response. I said, I'd love to own my own company, but I still want to work for your company. But it wasn't great. But on a genuine note, my sister does architecture in the US, and we've always kind of discussed wanting to set up a green estate in Zimbabwe. So it'll be a massive piece of land with huge kind of solar panels, trying to run our own kind of water system. It'll be huge kind of crops that are all kind of paying for themselves, growing through our own kind of projects, and then set up schools, trying to invest into that, and just try and give something back to Zimbabwe. And so we've always kind of joked that we don't have any idea of what life has to give us, so we have to go out and find it. But when we have found it, to go back and try and use our skills there. And I've always kind of thought, if I can, I don't know if you watched that Innocence Project. I think it was Making a Murderer in the US. There was a whole program about trying to help people who were wrongly convicted.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah.
And I was always thought, well, I could go back and I could do that. I mean, in a country where there's no human rights, I'm sure I wouldn't have a shortage of innocent parties to help.
Yeah.
And so maybe not in 5 years, but maybe in 30, when I can actually contribute.
Yeah.
That would be something I'd like to do. But as with anything, you don't know where you're going to end up.
You strike me as the type of guy that you talk about things and life and challenges as if it's a very simple thing. It's just like, no, as you said earlier on, there's no point in overcomplicating something. It's just like, I want to get there, and we'll worry about the repercussions of like certain other things later. I've spoken to people like that before, and one common thing that I have noticed, not all of them, but something in common, is they come from an agricultural background. You obviously grew up on a farm, as you said. You worked on a farm. I guess you probably at an early age learned the value, or what hard work is, we'll say. But maybe you're also a little bit more connected to nature and its simplicity. It's not necessarily overcomplicating things. It just needs to be done.
Yeah, I would say that's a very interesting point to make. And I would say it's probably the same, but there's definitely a tendency with farmers in Zimbabwe to always, well, the saying goes, we'll make a plan. And it doesn't matter what they're faced with.
Yeah.
The response is always, we'll come up with a plan, we'll make a plan. And as you say, I'd say when you're working in agriculture, you're faced with so many shortages of goods, and you never have anything working at 100%.
Yeah.
Sure, the tractor needs new oil every single day of the week.
Yeah.
But it's always like, we'll make a plan. We'll deal with that then. I mean, what good is it to worry today?
Yeah, like perhaps like we grow up, like you obviously grew up in an agricultural background as well. I didn't, but maybe people growing up similar to me, we grow up in a situation where there's not too many problems. In our day-to-day, the problems are, it's raining and I have to cycle to school, or, generally speaking, and, my family also didn't run a business. Having an agricultural background, they're businesses at the end of the day. So maybe you are seeing possibly your parents or whoever, family members, dealing with problems on a daily basis and how they deal with them. So perhaps you're growing up looking at people, because, my parents dealt with their problems at work, and family problems were a different type of thing, but the, let's say, problem solving things mostly were outside of our circle. But maybe you grow up where you're kind of learning, like, oh, here's a family member, and like he's, as you said, I need to change the tractor oil today, otherwise we're not going to get that done. And they don't freak out, they just go and do it. So you might be subconsciously learning that. I don't know, I'm just kind of trying to understand this myself more than anything else, but it could be something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we get I heard a good one where you have a chess player from 20 years ago who's trying to figure out all of these games and learn where the best place is, and then 20 years later you have the next world chess champion who's just devoured all of that previous information that some others would have worked 10 years to try and figure out, and they're just devouring that information because they're born after. They don't need to solve the problems of the past because they've just been solved by someone else.
Yeah.
So I think, getting more experience and being exposed more to problems earlier on, we'll just inherently learn to kind of fix them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we don't need to worry about. Now, sometimes you might not be able to use a laminator because you've never used a laminator in your life or something like that. Obviously, that's a problem that you need to fix. But it's not a major life problem that you can't find out more information about. Your families will talk to you if they're good communicators, and I mean, you kind of just develop that throughout life, those problem solving skills.
I would say we definitely getting better, just across the board, just with the amount of information we have access to. As you said, the way we communicate, I think, has certainly got better. I mean, you have people kind of reviewing the way that the parental style in the 60s and 70s compared to now. I think naturally there's a tendency that we are going to continuously be picking up information quicker and putting aside unnecessary information. And whether or not that's going to have a positive impact, because I mean, we do kind of need the unnecessary information for everything else that doesn't just require progress. But I can certainly see it. But on a more kind of rounded note, I'd say the Irish are probably the exact same as the Zimbabweans. I mean, the amount of times I've told someone about a issue and they come back with, sure, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what can you do? Like, and the first time I heard that, I wasn't entirely sure what to respond with.
Can't do much. Like,
yeah, it'll be grand. Yeah, it can get you. It's a good technique sometimes, and it's also probably why we have a lot of problems. It's not black. It's like sometimes I think we have problems and we're like, sure, that'll be grand. It's like, probably we actually need someone to deal with this, as opposed to just say it'll be fine.
I don't think we're listening, to be honest. I think we finally, sure, what can you do about it? Like, you haven't been listening to the person's problem.
Yeah.
So it's a very vague answer. But
I've had to explain the concept, particularly because I lived in Spain for 4 years, and obviously there's no translation for it'll be grand, but well, you can say it'll be fine, but that idea, it just sometimes it just didn't. In certain situations, it wasn't understood. You're like, what do you mean it'll be fine?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? I was like, I'm not going to do anything.
My house is just burnt down.
Yeah. How can you just say it'll be fine? Yeah. It's one of those things that you don't even know. As an Irish person who's never really thought about it before, you don't know what to say. You're like, I don't know. It's going to be okay.
You're live, aren't you?
Yeah. Is there any, like, you've been in Dublin now since 2015. You've gotten through the first initial stages of overspending in Temple Bar. Where do you? We spoke earlier in one of our other podcasts about your third place, right? So you have your home, you have your work, and then generally people look to or probably need a third place, whether it's a gym or a sport or the pub or a cafe, whatever. Where do you like to spend time outside of the first two places, which are work and home?
Geez, probably the gym. I'd say I'm big into the fitness.
Yeah,
we've recently got a housemate who's a mad PT.
Okay,
and so within a week we were quickly told that everything we'd been doing was completely wrong, and we're going to be injured within a few days, and our diets were terrible. So we on this huge fitness buzz, and so
Right.
I joined this gym on Navan Road in Cabra, and it's part of the Deaf Village.
Yeah.
So it's really nice setup. There's like a pool. It's one of the good spots, and so especially in winter now, with the extreme heating in the spot.
Oh, nice.
Go and spend a few hours in the evening.
Brilliant. Yeah. What about when you're out in the city? Like, do you any cafes, pubs, or restaurants that you enjoy?
So Harkin's Pub, Harkin's Bistro, probably the best, if not second best. I know everyone's going to say Gravediggers is the top Guinness, but Harkin's out near St James's is definitely one of my favorite spots. It's very much a nice working class pub.
Yeah,
there's not too much music. In the summer, you can sit outside, and it's a short walk into town.
Yeah,
And there's an old lad there. I think they call him Bull. He's been pouring pints since he was 15, and he pours these absolute creamers. So
nice.
definitely go if you haven't been.
Yeah.
Where would you guys recommend?
Depends really, as you said, on what you're looking for. And my tastes have probably changed a lot over the years as well. I depend, like if I wanted to go for a nice pint of Guinness and, like as you said, like a chat with a mate or whatever, I'd go to Mulligan's, just near Tara Street Station there.
Okay.
That's a nice pub, a nice Guinness as well. I used to love the Stag's Head.
Yeah,
I don't anymore like it so much. I'm not sure what changed or what happened there, but it definitely went up in terms of SEO on TripAdvisor or whatever, and it just lost a little bit of it. It started doing food, too much food. There's a difference between like doing a bit of finger food and like an Irish pub, like
notions.
It's not notions. It's you're doing too much.
Yeah.
I want to figure
what you did before was brilliant.
Pour the pints.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's outside work, it's kind of one of those nice places you can just go get your pint and then you can go home after one. I just that's what I like about it.
After one.
Well, it depends on what day you go. Like on a Monday, maybe one. Monday, one day. Tuesday.
Yeah, there's no
Wednesday,
such thing as one pint.
What day?
Then, apart from that, also Bose. I don't know if you know Bose. They do a
Toby
lovely
Bose.
pint. Yeah, they do. Just beside Doyle's there. Also, it's quite close to Mulligan's actually. So they're two good spots for a Guinness. And yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't really been going out as much as I used to. Like in the past, I suppose I was spending a lot more time. I used to work in the city centre, spend a lot more time going out. But I'm sticking to my local area these days, becoming a bit of a boring old man.
Oh, yeah. You were that for a while though.
Yeah, well, I also went from one extreme to the other, maybe. Well, yeah, they'd be my recommendations for anybody listening. Yeah.
I'll definitely have to give Mulligan's a go.
For sure.
Mulligan's
You love
good,
Mulligan's. Mulligan's is a nice spot, nice people too. And yeah, you get an interesting mixture of people. You get a lot of locals, lads who've been going there for years, mixed in with a few people coming over from the Irish Times building, and a few random just heads in there because there's a big co-working space just around the corner now. So you'll get a lot of freelancers and stuff like that going in too.
I'm a big fan of Fibbers actually. Now that I think about it, Fibber McGee's on Parnell Street. Good for Smithwick's anyways, and it might not be like Guinness's kind of but there's plenty of pool, plenty of music, plenty of people to talk to. That's what I like. And rock music as well. So a live band now and again, which is good.
If you were chatting to someone who was thinking about, like a friend of yours or whatever, called up from whatever country and said, like, listen, I'm thinking about moving to Dublin. Is there any bit of advice you'd give them before they came here?
Yeah, I'd probably say sort your accommodation out well before you land here. But no, on a serious note, I'd probably say it can get quite expensive, so cycle around. Obviously, there's easy ways to buy good food without having to compromise. So like shop Aldi and Lidl and those kind of spots. And then stick to pubs and stick to pints. Don't be going to coppers and getting that double rum and coke because it's going to set you back.
Yeah,
considerable amount.
I got awful carried. Did I tell you this? I got super carried away. Speaking of, like, the effect of price and alcohol and like what it can do to you. I went to an event, like a kind of work event a couple of weeks ago, not really knowing that it was going to be an open bar. So I walked in and it was a talk. So there was like these three guys talking about their career paths and how they got there, and these startup tech companies. So the guy on the way in, he hands me these 2 tickets and I go, yeah, you can get yourself a drink at the bar with these. And I was like, oh, great. And I think they must have been expecting way more people to attend than they originally showed up. So I went back for after the 2 drinks, I went back and I was like, I'm just assuming I have to pay. He's like, oh no, the bar is still open if you want to get another drink. And people had started going home at this point. I was like, okay, yeah. So I got another drink. Then I went back again. I was like, it's hardly still free. He's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. The barman said this to me. he goes, I'm really hoping nobody's organised this event is listening, because but again, the CCTV cameras out now. He said there's 45 minutes of this bar left open, and there's a grand behind the bar. And there was about 3 of us drinking at this point. And he's like, what would you like to drink? And I said, well, I was going to have a whiskey. He's like, well, do you want to have like the most expensive whiskey we have? And I was like, okay. And he's like, do you want to make it a double? And I was like, okay. So I had about 3 of those. And just polluted drunk. Like, terrible. Like, thankfully I made it out of there without making too much of a scene, but whoa, I couldn't handle the free bar, you know. It was just one, it wasn't expected. And then also because
3
as you
double
said,
whiskeys as well that took you up.
yeah, on top of the like pints that I'd had before that. It's funny because alcohol is so expensive that when someone goes it's free, even though it's something, you know, it's stupid. I didn't need the 3rd double whiskey or whatever.
You never do.
And I think it was the first one that sent me over the edge, actually. But it's hard to get your head around that as an Irish man and say no. It's like when we go on holidays to Spain and the guy, they don't use measures, they just pour. And you're probably like, no, that's enough.
2.
But your eyes just light up and you're like, I can't say no, this guy. Yeah, it's a weird situation. But anyway, Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been really interesting chatting to you. You've got a cool background, and you've had great success here as well. So
yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
I hope if you ever, you work your way back to Zimbabwe and do those things with your sister, that you don't forget us here in Ireland and you come back and visit. And yeah, it's I'm sure you've learned a lot here too.
Most certainly, I'll definitely be seeing you guys around on a tall chair in Mulligan's at some point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thanks, Ross. Thanks for everyone for listening, and yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.